Subscribe for everyday news story cracks in the foundation. The truth is, I never imagined I would become the kind of woman who betrayed her marriage. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have laughed, confident, certain, and told you that my marriage was solid. Weathered, yes, softened around the edges by 15 years of life and responsibility, but still a structure I believed in. David was my constant, reliable, steady, intentional, an architect, both in profession and in personality. He built beautiful structures and kept our family running with the same quiet order, taking out the recycling every Thursday, filling my car with gas when he used it, cooking his famous lasagna on Sundays. But somewhere along the way, the quiet partnership between us had shifted into silence, a silence that echoed, a silence that reminded me daily of the widening space between us. We still talked, we still functioned, we discussed our daughter Chloe's school play, my work at the art gallery, his projects. But our conversations felt like we were reading from different scripts. The intimacy, the glances that spoke whole paragraphs, the casual touch of his hand on mine, had become memories instead of moments. Then there was Mark. He walked into the gallery one Tuesday afternoon, a man with bright curiosity in his eyes, and a warm, deliberate smile. He was a collector, new in the city and eager to explore its art scene. He asked for my thoughts about a modern abstract piece, not just professionally, but personally. What did it make me feel? What music did it remind me of? Nobody had asked me a question like that in years. What followed wasn't reckless or scandalous, at least not in my mind. It was emotional, quiet. It felt gentle, like slipping into a version of myself I hadn't seen in a long time. Long lunches, conversations that made me feel special, seen, interesting. I convinced myself I wasn't hurting anyone. David was busy. I was lonely. And I told myself those two truths justified a third. But David was an architect. His entire life revolved around noticing tiny fractures before they became structural failures. He noticed the shift in me, long before I noticed him noticing. The first sign was subtle. I came home one Thursday, my face warm from an afternoon spent talking with Mark. On the kitchen counter, beside the fruit bowl, lay a single red rose. My heart lurched. Had he found out? But when I asked, David only shrugged. A client had sent a bouquet to the office. 1 flower per team lead. He brought one home for me. A simple gesture. But why only one? Why not the whole bouquet? The question whispered in the back of my mind. It was only the beginning. The architect begins to rebuild. A week later, the phone I used to talk to Mark, my secret phone, died. Panic raced through me. If David needed me, if he checked my regular phone for anything, I rushed home with a flimsy excuse ready. But he was calm, unbothered, almost observing. Then came the emails. Not to me, for me. A pottery class. A lecture series on Renaissance art. A volunteer program at the library. You're always saying you want to try new things, he said. But every event had one thing in common. They took place during the hours I usually saw Mark. I had to cancel twice. Mark grew impatient. I grew uneasy. And then came the treehouse. David announced, almost casually, that he was building a treehouse for Chloe. Not just a structure, but an architectural marvel. A wraparound porch, shuttered windows, even a tiny weather vane. And he wanted my help, the color choices, the finishing touches, holding board steady. He was pulling me back into our family with the single thread I couldn't bring myself to cut, my daughter's joy. While Mark grew frustrated, David grew present. Every board we nailed together pressed heavier on my conscience. The cracks in my fantasy widened. One evening, wiping dishes after dinner, David said, "We should take a trip, just the two of us." A simple sentence, a devastating one. A trip meant choosing. I already had plans with Mark. A romantic night in the city he had insisted would define our future. But David had already booked a cabin in the mountains. When I faltered, he looked at me with an unsettling calm. "Cancel it," he said. Not a suggestion, an instruction. Mark's reaction when I canceled was vicious. "You're choosing comfort over courage," he snapped. "You're not the woman I thought you were." His words stung, but behind them I saw something small, selfish, and undeniably true. He didn't want my life. He wanted my escape. The trip with David approached like a storm I could not outrun. The mountain truth. The drive to the mountains was silent, but not empty. David played soft jazz, the music we listened to when we first dated. The inn was stunning, serene, a perfect place for honesty, which terrified me. On the balcony, he handed me a glass of wine. "To us," he said, with quiet gravity. When I tried to speak, tried to confess, he raised a hand. "Not yet. Listen first." I sat, heart pounding. "I noticed a change in you 3 months ago," he said. "Your energy, your distraction, the light in your eyes that wasn't for me." His voice was calm, almost clinical. "At first, I was angry. But if I confronted you in anger, you would have shut down or run. and I wasn't interested in chasing you away. He took a slow breath. I'm an architect. I don't demolish out of panic. I examine. I reinforce. I rebuild. So that's what I decided to do. He explained everything, the rose, the suspiciously timed classes, the treehouse. Then he showed me his phone. Read it. It was an email sent to Mark from the Modern Art Institute of Singapore. A job offer, rescinded. A dream position, revoked, citing concerns about ethics and integrity. You're not on any board, I whispered. A cold smile crossed his face. No, but Mark doesn't know that. He explained how he created a replica email domain, hired a voice actor, conducted false interviews, an entire fabricated hiring process. He was going to leave for Singapore, David said. He probably planned to ask you to join him. You would have had to decide. My breath caught. But now, David continued, there is no job, no future for him in that direction. I'll be sending discreet letters to every major gallery. His career, what he used to impress you, is over. I felt sick, and my revenge on you. His voice softened, but held terrifying resolve. Is that you stay? He came closer. You live with the knowledge of what you did. You live with the man you underestimated. You rebuild the life you nearly destroyed. No dramatic exits. No tragic heroine story. Just the truth. Then he walked inside, leaving me alone with the night air and the weight of every choice I had made. Reconstruction. We returned home, and the silence between us was no longer ignorance or avoidance. It was awareness. It was consequence. I ended things with Mark in a short phone call. His fury only affirmed David's insight. Mark had been an escape, not a future. The treehouse still stands in our backyard, beautiful, intricate, and haunting. A monument to everything I almost broke. David doesn't gloat. He doesn't lecture. He simply continues living with the quiet competence of a man who fought for his family in his own way. We are rebuilding, slowly, carefully, not with romance, not yet, but with intention, with honesty, with daily effort. The love is not gone, but it is different now, sharper, heavier with truth. My punishment is simple. I remain, I remember, I rebuild, and in the process, I finally understand the depth of the man I married, the architect who saved our family not by tearing down what I broke, but by forcing me to see its worth.